Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. My name is Ian, and I'm joined by Jen, Ken, and Paul. And together, we're your Marketing Guides super team. Anyone, anyone who has worked in a large, that's ad lib, as you can tell. Anyone who has worked in a large organization understand that there's often a schism between sales and marketing. The salespeople complain about the quality of leads they're getting, or where their trade show booth is located, or the lack of sales support materials to help them land customers. While on the flip side, marketing is sending what they believe are highly qualified, vetted leads and have equipped the sales team with the materials they believe they need to help move the customers through their buying journey. Often there can be built up animosity between the two camps. It's horrible sometimes. But marketing and sales are each vital and are part of the same continuum, the customer's buying journey. So let's jump in and explore why this topic is important to you and what you can do about it to attract, engage, and convert more customers. So, Jen, first of all, have you experienced this in your career, and what was the result?
The marketing sales, this kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yes, yeah, I have. Before running my company, I was in corporate marketing, and there was always a sales team. And I guess it depends on the organization, because if we just put the disclaimer out there that there are marketing and sales teams that work really well together, they do exist.
Yeah.
But by and large, my experience was that they didn't work well together, and it wasn't necessarily that they were really like as dramatic as you you say. Although there are some stereotypes that do exist between marketing and sales that you got to make fun of. But the fact is a couple of different things. Sometimes they're not set up to work together. And that if you get into a large company, I mean, the idea of working in silos and the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing is not, it's a very real reality. As well, too, you have to understand that sales is often compensated by either 100% or, scaled back any kind of percentage of commission. So targets are based on selling X amount of this solution, this product, or this volume, right? So that really gets the salesperson's attention or the sales team's attention into what they're supposed to do, the goals they're supposed to attain. Whereas in marketing, at least in corporate marketing, in my experience, we weren't compensated that way. So first, like right off the bat, it gives you a different focus for, the time that you're going to use today doing some work. So just the way that they're set up, just the way that they're provided goals, and just the way that they're compensated, that can drive a huge wedge between the two different companies working together. As well, I mean, in at least in North America, to be quite honest, I mean, sales, unless you've spent any time learning how to sell or getting trained in sales or with sales teams, you could be. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't blame you for thinking that sales was, always about the sale, very aggressive, got to make my numbers, that's all that matters. And so sometimes that can be a little bit intimidating in order to try and work with the teams. So to answer your question, yeah, I've experienced it. I've experienced it in all different kinds of ways. I mean, while we talk about sales being, just concerned about the numbers, also too, some of the things is sometimes we feel or we can see that, sales sometimes makes up or stretches the capabilities of the product or service in order to get the sales. On the other hand, flip on the other head and make fun of marketing for a second. I mean, you guys have heard me say this phrase. I didn't make up this phrase. It was told to me that, marketing is just the arts and crafts department, right? So in some organizations, it can feel that all marketing is doing is putting logos on things. So it does depend where you come from, and it does depend what's going on in your organization. But to answer your question, yeah, I've experienced, that's a lot of the chasm that I've seen between the two. And I believe it has a lot to do with how the two departments are compensated. It just makes your focus go a little bit different ways when you're on the sales side, compensated for selling XYZ, by the end of the month, and marketing, you're compensated usually, at your flat rate, but you have the responsibility to get different promotions out for certain launches.
And thanks for answering that, Jen. And what's really interesting to me is that at a high level, when you take it up, to the executive, the C-suite, what you're looking at there, regardless of whether it's your VP of marketing, your VP of sales, whatever it is, at that level, you're all talking about ultimately the same goals, which are building the business, usually growing your revenue, and marketing's as accountable for that as sales is. But once you start drilling down into the departments, that's where that the lopsided goals sometimes happen, right? So I think as we talk today, we'll start uncover maybe how, especially with small to medium-sized businesses, how we might be able to resolve some of that challenge. Ken, have you encountered this schism between sales and marketing teams, or sales and marketing efforts in small to medium-sized businesses? And if so, what was the result?
Yeah. Again, going back before I started my company, I was basically the sales and operations manager for a division of a company that was worth half of the revenue of the company. I was the only one who knew that piece of the business on the management team. And so our marketing department was really good at cranking out stuff to support the other 50%, but they didn't really understand what we needed for sales and marketing or for the sales activities that my team had to do, which was selling to governments. So it was all request for proposal based. It required a whole completely different set of assets. And while the 50% of the business that I wasn't involved in, that actually was our competitive advantage to help me sell what we needed to do, because it was that extra thing that nobody else had. So it was great, but it got to the point where basically I created our own marketing department, specifically to address our needs, to provide, the assets that we needed, because there just wasn't the alignment to get the information. We got a lot of great information from our marketing department, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't enough. And so that actually is how I got into the world of marketing. The thing that I see most commonly now from the time I've had my business is really, it all comes down to strategy. And it all comes down to business goals and objectives, and understanding what's profitable for the business and what's not, and getting marketing and sales in alignment with each other around those things. Salespeople tend to sell whatever they can sell, and they're incentivized usually to make the sale, and that's how their compensation is very heavily weighted, as Jen talked about. That may not align really well with what the business is prepared to deliver. And maybe even if it is prepared to deliver, is that what it wants to deliver? And, and so the messaging, there's just confusion. And that's the biggest schism that I see as, the sales. It's like, okay, well, we do websites, right? Why can't we do an e-commerce website?
Right.
Like, we can, we don't want to, because we're not sure we can do it. And we do a good job at it, but it's not the scalable, repeatable. We don't know the tool sets as well. We're going to have to go invest a lot of time and energy to do a lot of this stuff, yada, yada, yada. And so there's a really big flaw there, I think, that happens. I've also dabbled with hiring outside sales, cold calling companies, appointment setters and things like that. And while that can work really, really great in certain circumstances, it also generates a tremendous amount of crap. I had a guy
That's
that,
a technical term.
yes,
Yeah.
it
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
So no matter how many times you say this, again, they think that they can sell anything. And so it's like one of the crazy things was one of these cold calling companies was trying to get us to sell a solution to do email marketing to a vaping business that had no list. And we were supposed to do 2 email blasts a month for them.
Hmm.
It's like, no, we can't do that. First of all, they have no list, and so it's like, no, we can't. We're not going to fulfill on that. I'm going to turn that business down, and there was just a constant misalignment there. So the challenge, that's always going to be the biggest challenge, is how do you get sales aligned, and I think compensation has to be revisited to make sure that everybody in the company is aligned with what you're selling, what you're fulfilling, and what you want to do and deliver as a company, and what you want to have your company known for at the end of the day.
You make such a good point there, Ken, about it's like one of the things I've noticed is often marketing will understand, okay, well, maybe we start off, we think we could serve everyone, but we do our research and we target into a specific type of buyer with these kind of problems, and away we go. One of the things that I find, and you spoke about this, is where sales is always coming back, and it's almost like they're reinventing the wheel, specific to every different client that they're trying to land. Well, like, these guys need this, or we need the deck to say this, or can you just send these kind of samples to them over there? And well, like, bless them, they're trying to make the sale, but I think, them not understanding that the system behind marketing to support them, it can't just be tailored to every single opportunity that they have. And I've seen that, like, different industries, different product levels, sort of all price levels. It's crazy.
It is, back in my software development days, years and years and years ago, I got trained in this thing called the capability maturity model. And, it's basically looking at how do you develop software. And when people's lives are at stake, you have to get really serious about this. And so they came up with 5 stages of maturity for software development and IT organizations. And level 1 is almost always accomplished through heroism. It's chaos. And it's usually the success. And I hear, I'm not a sales consultant. I don't, I've talked to sales consultants, but it sounds to me like in many organizations, there's always that one superstar salesperson that can just sell anything, and they sell a lot of it. That's heroism. And that's a really, really, really dangerous way to build a business, because all it takes is for that one person to be gone, and you're probably going to lose a bunch of customers. You're not going to be able to get a lot of that opportunity coming. There's nothing systemic about that. Whereas when you move into the world of software development, and we've talked about doing this, in terms of marketing and sales, you have these levels of maturity that you need to achieve, repeatability, measurement, operationalization, and on to achieve these levels. And if you're relying on a superstar salesperson, if something ever happens to that salesperson, it's probably going to be pretty catastrophic to the business.
Yep. And that's a great point. I've seen that myself several times in the businesses I've been in. Paul, what are some signs you have a problem between sales and marketing?
They're arguing with one another.
Yeah. I know you're saying it in jest, but that's true.
All 3 of you just touched on this, and I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that sales, their compensation is largely based on commission, almost always. And that may have worked 50 years ago when the buyer journey was very simplistic, and it's just not that way anymore. And I think salespeople are aware of the buyer's journey, but they don't really understand it. They probably don't realize that there's can be 15, 17, 20 touch points. And, this thing called the internet didn't exist 50 years ago. And the buyer is in control, and the marketing team understands that buyer journey. At least they should. And the buyer is in control. By the time they contact a business, they've already done their research. And they've basically developed a short list of who they're going to talk to. So prospects might be getting stuck in a certain phase of that process, and sales wouldn't know that, because sales wants to go from, here's the product, when are you going to buy it? And that just doesn't happen. It doesn't work. It goes back to this buyer journey. And like Ken said, they tend to, a lot of times they sell whatever they can sell. And if you find yourself having a lot of returns, giving a lot of refunds, well, that's probably going back to the salesperson not meeting the customer's expectations. So I think until this whole issue of how salespeople are compensated is revisited, there's always going to be some conflict between the two, because the marketing side is trying to cater to that buyer journey and move them through this process, where the salespeople, if they want to get paid, they have to sell something. And that is inherently going to cause a conflict.
You make a good point, Paul. One of the things you said made me think about the fact that, so if we take along with what Ken said, and you have a salesperson who's kind of promising the moon, or the product or service doesn't do what they're like, yeah, it does. You can, well, sure. Or, we can build you an e-commerce website. Sometimes what happens is they do make the sale, and then it's on the either IT development or whoever it is in the company to fulfill that custom order somehow. And that's going to cost time and money and stress, and everybody's just trying to save face and get it out the door and make sure that the customer is happy. And that takes away from the ability to grow your business as well, because if you have all hands on deck trying to make something very, very custom, when your whole organization is not based around selling something very custom, then that takes time away from bringing in, and even with that salesperson, from bringing in the right leads, and marketing being able to do their promotions and whatnot. So even though it feels like, okay, we're trying to please the customer, make the sales, get my commission, we're trying to give them what they what we could do, but we just don't have that version out for sale. In the end, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it from a business point of view, from time, from stress, from taking your people away from what they're regularly doing. So it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they have two different agendas. The job of the marketing department is to understand the buyer journey and to move them through that and go from prospect to getting them over to the sales department, so to speak, where they make the sale. Whereas the sales department, their job is to sell products or services, and that's how they get paid.
Mm-hmm. No,
so they don't care about that whole journey, because they don't get paid.
Yeah. And just so folks that don't think that we're just slamming sales, I've personally
not
done
at all.
Just what I have said you shouldn't be doing. Creating a bespoke program or something, and then it just you're spending all your days trying to fulfill it, right? You're just like, why did I do that?
I'm not slamming salespeople. It's just the reality is they're generally on commission, so they don't get paid unless they make a sale. And you could argue that that's an unfair compensation system in the world we live in now, because like I said, 50 years ago, when we didn't have this internet thing and the buyer journey was pretty simple, maybe that model made sense, but it probably doesn't make sense anymore.
I mean, we're talking about several different aspects of an organization here. It's not just sales and marketing, or sales versus marketing. It's the executive team. It's also product development, because if you don't have well-defined products that whether it's a service that's productized, or whether it's actually something that you purchase, like a hamburger or a pizza or a widget or whatever it might be, If those aren't well defined and described, you're setting yourself up for failure. If you don't understand the profit margins that go into the assembly of those solutions, you're setting yourself up for failure. So they're really multidimensional things here. It's not just sales versus marketing kind of a problem. And if you're finding that sales and marketing are arguing, then maybe it's a bigger problem, organizationally.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is that we're talking as if there's two very well defined sales and marketing teams. A lot of small businesses don't have that. They probably have people that wear multiple hats. And what's interesting is even this same challenge can present itself to them where, as some examples I've seen where, a dental clinic has used a particular offer and they didn't explain that offer was now in play. And so people would call up and say, hey, I want your free teeth whitening offer. And they're like, we don't have a free teeth whitening offer. And then it becomes this battle between, and essentially, reception is the first step in the sales process. That there's a handoff happening there, right? And I think we'll actually get into that in a second, because I think this collaborative team approach, where whether you do have defined teams or it's actually just people wearing different hats within your business, if you can create an atmosphere where everybody owns the sale to some degree, yes, there may be different compensation schemes, but if everybody owns the sale, and if the sales people can also own the relationship after the sale, that's where I've seen things go really, really well. And where the handoffs between people, processes in the business, when they happen really well, I think that can create a culture that actually redefines how this process can essentially work. And I think that leads into a great question for Jen. Because this has been referenced a little bit, but I thought it would be helpful. Can you describe in more detail what the customer buying journey is and how it differs from the sales process that most businesses are familiar with?
Sure. So the sale, or the hourglass, or the customer journey that we all on this podcast, what do you call it? Subscribe to, believe in, is the one that was formulated and taught to us by Duct Tape Marketing, John Jantsch, and it has just held the test of time. And it's got these different stages. So I'll just go through them. So know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer. If you do any kind of, it depends what kind of sales organization you're in, but with some research online, what I was just looking for, just like trust sales funnel, trust sales process. What always came up was this process. You go from being unaware of the product or service to being a lead, a prospect, and then a customer. So while there's less steps on the sales side, what's also very interesting is that, you're either walking around unaware and all of a sudden you're a lead for the salesperson. It just seems like that's a bit of a gap, where on the marketing side, you can know and be aware of a product or service. Next, you got to warm up to it. So you got to trust that, one vendor over another is the one that you want to do business with. So I guess the customer journey that we map our work to and that we think about so much every day has a lot to do with how we interact as humans and how we build, awareness and trust with different people and different things. So right there as well, if you're looking at two different reasons why sales and marketing may not be aligned, our journey, let's call it that, on the marketing side, is it's got more stages in it, but it just seems to follow along the natural process that someone would develop as they're looking to buy from you. I mean, obviously, in both situations, you go from being unaware to knowing. But in sales, you don't just they just seem to, according to this process, it just seems like everybody's a lead. You know what I mean? And then in marketing, what's been drilled into us is, not everybody's going to buy from you. Not everybody should buy from you. You shouldn't be looking to sell to everybody, right? So the know, like, trust. And there's a lot of education as well that is done and can be done. And there's a real opportunity during the know, like, trust stage for your potential customer to really get to come to see your point of view. And if they go down this kind of funnel, by the time they get to a salesperson interaction, they might be well on their way to a sale, to saying yes, as opposed to going from unaware to all of a sudden you're a lead and now I got to sell you. So those are two different processes, and another illustration of why we may not be even aligned there.
Yeah, and what's interesting about what you said too, it just reminds me of how a lot of organizations have moved away from direct sales, which is the traditional model of you have a sales team and their whole task is to go out and hunt, right? And as you guys said, anyone is a potential prospect. And you eat what you kill, right? From a sales standpoint, that's kind of the traditional model that a lot of businesses were founded on. But over the years, we've seen a radical shift in, at least I have, in the organizations I've been and the organizations I now support with my business, is that is actually a rarity. In fact, it's more of an inbound process where when you have the marketing done right for your business, just as you were saying, you're leading them through this know, like, trust, try process. And then when the person is ready, they pop up on the salesperson or the teams, in front of them, and they're now prepared to actually buy rather than to be sold to. And so a lot of sales teams, quite frankly, I think this new kind of way things are done makes sales a heck of a lot easier for them, because you're preparing the people to be aligned with, just as you were saying, your viewpoint, your strengths, your weaknesses, the position of your products and service compared to the competitors. So it's I've actually seen where the sales teams have now started to understand they're part of this family, because if they don't treat marketing people well, they perhaps won't be getting as well qualified leads into their pot. Ken, so Jen talked about the marketing hourglass. I wondered if you could go a little bit deeper into that, about how that reflects the buyer's journey, how it maintains this continuum from the buyer's perspective, rather than, they're in my funnel as a business, but maybe, how it flips this whole relationship on its head, and it helps, how it helps the business combine that sales and marketing. I'll say marketing and sales, because marketing usually precedes the sales, but how it combines that into one continuum and helps businesses.
Yeah. So Paul, I think, mentioned that, the buyer has control over their journey much more than they've ever had, because of the internet, because of all of the various resources that are out there. And so, I think it's also important for us to take a step back, though, and say, there are certain businesses that have to follow much more of the buyer's journey that Jen described from duct tape marketing, the marketing hourglass, as it's referred to, the know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer, because it's a longer sales cycle and it requires more education, and and you need to arm through various online properties the person who's interested in learning about and starting to like and understand what the business and the solution can provide and how it solves their problem. That may be radically different for one business than another business. If you're a water restoration company, if somebody goes down and they see 2 feet of water in their basement, are they going to go read a bunch of blog posts? No. They're going to go find the company that shows up on the top of Google and they're going to call and they're going to do business with the company that probably is the first one that answers them back, that gives them a credible answer that can come out and fix their problem in a timely manner.
Yeah.
So, while we like to abstract this whole buyer's journey, the reality is sometimes it practically does not exist. In other cases, if you're making an investment to, buy a luxury car, and you're trying to decide, do I want a Tesla? Do I want, an Audi or a Lexus or whatever? You may spend hours and hours. I mean, I think there are studies out there that show for a car purchase, there are like upwards of 30 plus touch points that somebody does. And almost all of those are before they ever even contact a dealership, or the 2 or 3 dealerships that they might want to go engage with. So the marketing hourglass is really designed to provide as much alignment between sales and marketing as possible, to get the consistency of messaging, to kind of map out that buyer's journey, to do as much as we can as an organization of guiding that process. We're not going to control it. We've lost control. All we can do is guide it now, and we can guide it through the content that we create at the know, the like levels. Getting great reputations, building quality reviews for that trust, having certifications. And then here's where I think really the magic happens, and I think it's really, really important, is the tri-stage. I think the tri-stage is so huge. It doesn't have to be a paid tried experience, although it frequently can be. But if you're a software company, you're going to provide a free demo. And you want people to use a product, to experience it, to see how it helps them solve their problem. In the case of a marketing company like ours, we might want to do a paid engagement. First of all, I think that's a really good idea to do for each other, because, I don't know about you guys. I know from my experience, sometimes I get a brand new customer that I think is, oh man, this is perfect. We can really help these people out. And over the course of the first 30 to 60 days of the engagement, you find out what you thought you were going to be doing for them is in no way what they expected to be receiving, even if you do a really good job of that up front. I know I'm guilty of that. I wear both a marketing and a sales hat for my company. And so, the rush to get to the sale meant that maybe I skipped a tri-stage that maybe I shouldn't have. And maybe I should have done more of a marketing strategy, or a total online presence audit, or some of the other tools that we have in our toolbox. Another thing that I like to use is well, I'll save that because I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But so anyway, you really want to try to get the alignment of the know, like, trust, try and buy aspects. Get those as aligned as possible throughout your organization, because what you're going to sell and what you're going to fulfill, your promise is going to be able to be more easily kept if that's an alignment. And then you flip it over. You turn over the hourglass. That's why we call it an hourglass. You turn it upside down, and now you've got the repeat and refer. And for most businesses, repeat business or referral business is really so much better, because the cost of acquisition is so much cheaper. If you can get somebody who's already made a purchase from you before, then your cost of acquisition is way, way down. They already know, like, and trust you. And likewise, if it's not a repeat type of an opportunity, like if you are a roofer, you're not going to get a lot of repeat customers per se, unless you do like roof maintenance and repair work. But you hope for referrals. You hope that somebody's had a great experience, and they're like, when they're talking to a friend, it's like, yeah, I had a hailstorm. I think maybe I need to have somebody come out and take a look at my roof. They're going to say, oh, you know what? You need to call these guys because of the experience they had. And, and that's, so you need, everybody in your company ultimately is a salesperson. You know, every interaction they have with the customer or your client or your patient, it is in some aspect sales. It's customer satisfaction that leads directly to, you know, the likelihood of repeat or referral business. And so I think it's important there. I don't know, Ian, if I'm really going into the detail that you're looking for here, but you know, each one of these stages you need to think about and design, because it's really the best opportunity we have to control the situation. StoryBrand also uses a couple of different terms that I want to mention, because I think while I think they're consistent with the marketing hourglass, it's a little bit more pure sales focused, and that is curiosity, enlightenment, and commitment. That's kind of the way StoryBrand looks at things. You've got to get people to be curious about your product or solution. Is it what's going to help them solve their problem? Is it going to help provide that transformation that they're looking for? At the end of the day, people are looking for transformation. So, you know, that curiosity is what stimulates that. So that's where, you know, it's kind of the equivalent of the know and like aspects of the duct tape marketing hourglass. The enlightenment, it's just starting to rain here. So for those of you who need rain, I wish we could send some your way, because we've been blessed with getting a decent amount of rain this year. But you know, with enlightenment, now you're helping people say, okay, now that I've got your interest, here is how I can solve your problem. And then you know, you can't ask for somebody to make that commitment and jump to the end right with the word commitment. You know, I mean, you can't expect that from the very first time they learn about your product, unless you provide a solution that has got a really short sales cycle. You know, the water damage restoration need. You know, it may not be realistic for people to make a decision within 15 minutes of the time that they start to do their search before they're hiring a business, because it's a critical need. So you also have to think about, you know, the elements of value hierarchy, which I think is a ridiculously great resource. There are existential needs that have to be solved right away. There are aspirational needs that may not need to be solved for months or years. And so it depends on what you sell and what your solutions are and how you solve those problems. So you really need to think about it from a multidimensional thing. And that's where ultimately you got to start with strategy. Or otherwise you're going to have serious misalignments. And you're probably leaving a lot of money on the table for your business. You're either not charging enough, or you're charging so much that nobody says, well, I don't see the value in that. So they just skip and move on to another solution. So you really need to think about all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I would say, just in addition to what you said already, Ken, was because you went on in great detail, is and sorry, that sounds like a negative. It's not. All I would say is that what I love about the marketing hourglass, because I'm super familiar with the other models you talked about, I actually don't see them as competing models. I see them as fitting in together.
Exactly.
Because one is about how you communicate in those, or how you communicate in those phases, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say about the marketing hourglass is that it starts with understanding the buyer's journey. So putting on the hat of, I'm a buyer of this product or service. How do I get to know this business, like this business, trust this business, try this business, and so on? But what I think is the powerful part for the business is, once you have that defined out, you then flip it around and you say, what do I, or can I as a business do in order to effectively move people through those phases? And that's where, you know, your example of a disaster restoration business, I actually see that as fitting perfectly in the hourglass, because what the business can do is what gets them ranking high in organic, in the maps, gets the reviews that people are going to look at real quick to go, oh, these guys have a 2-star rating. Crap, I'm not going to choose them. I'm going to choose the 4.8 star rating.
Right.
And those are specific strategies and tactics you use within your marketing hourglass that effectively build trust, that happens so fast when you have an immediate need. Like I see it in the dental industry all the time, because you have patients that want to choose a new dentist because they're new to the area. That's a much longer process, right? And then you have people that have an immediate need because they have a toothache and it's driving them nuts and they need emergency dental help.
Right.
But the actual things that you do as a business in order to win that patient are almost the same things. They just skip some steps along the way. So
the buyer skips the steps. The
Correct.
steps that you need to do to succeed still need to be accomplished.
absolutely.
That's a really good way to phrase that. I always have to go back to restaurants, because I really, restaurants, obviously they, for them, they've got to have a great presence on maps, and they've got to have great reviews. But for them to spend a lot of money to write a lot of content, to build up, the SEO around, the kinds of things we've talked about in the past with blog posts and things like that, it's really important you understand the nature of your business. And a one size fits all kind of approach doesn't necessarily work. But that's what's interesting about the marketing hourglass, is it provides you with that framework to give you the tools to say, okay, my business is like this. I still need something in the know phase. I still need something in the like phase. They're not going to be the same things as somebody that's selling a $60,000 project or a $200,000 vehicle, for example. They're different things that need to be done, but the framework itself still holds.
Hey, Paul, can you explain a little bit more about, and I throw around terms that I've learned in the corporate world sometimes. We used to use nice, beautiful terms like sales enablement or sales support. But can you explain a little bit more to our listeners or viewers what that is, why it's important, and how it helps people through their buying journey? Just, from maybe give some examples.
Yeah, it's kind of what we've been talking about on this whole podcast. That's what it's about. And Ken just mentioned this about, you have a buyer's journey, and the buyer may choose to skip steps in that journey, but that doesn't mean that those steps don't need to be there. And I was thinking about this as he was talking. Take a plumber. Okay, if you have a broken pipe, that's kind of an emergency need. People are going to go online. They're going to find what they deem is a reputable business, probably based on reviews and where they show up in the search results. And they're going to call because they have water leaking into their house and they need it fixed. But let's say that they're thinking about adding a bathroom or they're finishing a basement. That's not an emergency need. And that is going to be a much longer buyer journey. And that is where you need all those steps in place. And that's really what this sales enablement is guiding that buyer through that process and getting them over to sales. Take, like, let's say you're at a trade show. What do most people do at trade shows? They collect business cards, and then they try to call these people. Well, how well does that really work? But if you had, I know Ken's mentioned this in the past, if you had an iPad there where you have some kind of offer, maybe it's a consultation, maybe it's some kind of contest or some kind of giveaway, and they sign up. Well, now you have an email address, you have, you can get their phone number, and now you can put them into a nurture sequence. You can still contact them, but that doesn't mean they're ready to buy. So now you can put them into a nurture sequence and guide them through that process. And that's really kind of what sales enablement is that's what marketing should be doing. Ultimately, that's kind of what the marketing department's job is.
It's cool that you used the trade show analogy, because I think I think trade shows are like a microcosm of you can have an entire buyer's journey happen at a trade show, or it can start before the trade show. It can happen, the different phases of the hourglass can happen before, during, and after. But the cohesiveness of how, like, we've all probably been to a trade show where there was no cohesiveness between what the sales team there were doing and what the obvious marketing push or alignment or misalignment was. And you can see it, it's palpable, and it's a horrible experience. You just want to run away from that booth, even if you're interested in the product or service. You might look for the competition. But when those teams are aligned and sales has what they need in order to help the buyer get what they want, right? And everything around them in that environment from a marketing standpoint, whether it's a brochure or whatever, it has been aligned with that process. Man, it's a nice, like, you just feel natural to move through that process as a buyer.
Yeah, we actually talked about that on a previous podcast, about you can usually get a list of the vendors that are going to be at a trade show. And that's something marketing can do, and they can reach out to them, where they can say, okay, we need to contact this person, this business. And like you said, that's a process that can start before the trade show. And now you have a plan, you have a process that you can follow through.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jen, we've kind of broached this topic, but I wondered if you could just kind of barrage us with, what are some common examples of sales support for various businesses and industries that a marketing team or an agency can help provide?
Actual physical things. So is that what you mean? Like collateral and whatnot, that kind of support?
Yeah, or digital.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Digital, whatever. So, okay. Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, so just if you start to think, I mean, there was one point in time that I didn't realize that the salespeople were compensated by commission. That may sound ridiculous, but so knowing that, now you could probably start to understand as a marketing team why the salespeople may not spend a lot of time on anything but being out of the office, trying to do a deal, right? So that starts to make a lot more sense to you now. So what can we do for marketing, or as a marketing team, that can support these guys and gals to go out there and be, either in front of or having the Zoom call or doing the presentations, doing the work in order to get the sale, or doing the work in order to keep the sale and renew the sale afterwards. So things like, there could be specific campaigns you're running for certain salespeople or a certain segment of the sales team. And don't think that just because we know brochures and landing pages and campaigns and all that stuff can happen, that the salespeople know how supportive that can be as well. Just recently, I was talking to one of the sales guys in one of the companies we work with, and saying like, hey, if you've got this product specifically that you're after, we can set up some email campaigns for you to support that, throughout this quarter. And it was just like, it was amazing to him that we do that for him, and that it was possible to do that kind of thing. So just be sure that everything that we know how to do in marketing can be brand new to the sales team. So anything around landing pages, campaigns, promotions, any kind of, we've called that air cover in the past, anything that can help warm up those, if we're going by the salesperson, from unaware to lead, anything we can do to warm up the leads for them, anything that we can do to, make sure that their PowerPoint presentations or their videos or whatever are actually on brand, fulfilling the promise of the company. That's a way to start to support the sales team. So just don't take for granted all the things that we know to do that the sales team knows about and knows how supportive we can be to them.
Yep. That's awesome. That's a good list of toolbox items that you can pull out to help clients. Ken, how can someone determine where to start with creating sales support in their organization?
Well, I think you certainly look at the metrics, across the different stages of the hourglass. I mean, if you're not getting enough leads to support the sales team, then obviously you need to look at how can you, and take action on how can you start to do that. If you've got lead magnets or sales funnels that you've built that still aren't generating the leads, then maybe they're not the right ones, or maybe the lead magnet itself is of interest, but the email nurture series isn't doing its job of getting people to warm up and say, okay, I was curious, now I've learned enough, now I want to take that next step, and I want to try to engage with somebody to see how can you really help me solve my problem. And so you want to look at, all of those different metrics, across the board. I really do think the try is really a critical thing, because I think that's really where you get somebody in this day and age. Many people want to try a mini experience before they make that full-blown commitment. And so, designing the try offers with your salespeople is probably a really good strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I was thinking of in relation to this, like where you can find kind of the leak in your bucket, or, Perry Marshall uses the term, the bleeding neck, like you need emergency help with, to stop the bleeding, is, you as a sales team, or as a marketing team supporting our clients, one of the things I often see is it's about communication. So making sure the lines of communication are good so that you can facilitate the conversation about, one of the things with one of my big remodeling companies, we do a lot of advertising for them. And so we have goals as far as like we have to achieve a 5x return on investment for them from their ads. And that's in relation to their the quality of leads. And so I'm constantly asking them every month, like, how's the lead quality? I mean, I can see the end result of how many they track the quality according to like how many are disqualified leads and all that kind of stuff. But that can be a real key point of, hey, there needs to be some fixing of this. And why are the leads not converting, asking the questions. But I think that all starts with communication, whether it's a big business, a small business. Frontline staff on the phone can often give you insights into where there might be a gap or what would help them do their job better.
Yeah. I mean, I also like to look for, do an asset inventory. What all does the organization have? I mean, there are so many times there are videos, there are brochures, there are blog posts, there are half-done things, that never got finished. Look at all of those things and see what you can turn into those fast cash type opportunities, because chances are you may already have a lot of great assets that maybe they did work. Maybe you had a strategy that you did at a trade show 3 or 4 years ago, but the people who were involved in that have kind of, they've left the company or they've changed roles. They no longer have that responsibility to oversee those things. Go back and try to revisit those things and see if they're reusable. If they worked well in the past, they may still work really well, or they may work well with just some slight modifications. So, but again, it's like we live in a time where a lot of people they want to put their foot on the gas and they want to get to the end point as fast as possible. And sometimes I think you miss a lot of things that are really the best ways to build a sustainable business. And that's to take the time up front to do some strategy and some analysis and auditing the assets the marketing assets and the sales assets that you have. I mean, it could even be somebody may have a great signature line that they created, one of your salespeople. And maybe it's only them. Maybe you haven't institutionalized that across your entire sales force. Take a look and see whether you can find those types of opportunities.
It's funny you just mentioned that. You sparked a memory. In the larger organizations I was in, one of the ways that we would know where there was a gap in sales support materials was if we saw the maverick sales guys or women create their own materials. And so then that would be like a red flag to say, okay, either you're crazy and you don't really need that, which isn't the case most of the time, in all fairness, or there's a gap, right? They need something in order to help them appropriately sell something or explain something, and they don't have it. And so, you just sparked those memories of like, what on earth is this? And it's never on brand, right? The logo's twisted and the wrong colors or something. Paul, I thought this was a good, we're getting near wrap up time here, but what can a business owner or leadership team do to help the sales and marketing teams be in alignment?
That's a very interesting question, because I think a lot of times leadership or the business owners, they don't really understand this buyer journey process. But if you have a small or medium business and you have a business owner, they want sales. Yes, they want leads. You have to have leads to have sales, but they want to go from prospect to revenue. And a lot of times they don't realize that there's this whole journey that the buyer is really in control of. So I think it starts there, that they need to understand that. And then the marketing department needs to understand what sales needs, and sales needs to understand what marketing is doing to support them. And they might have to have some brainstorming sessions, or maybe someone from the marketing department goes up with some salespeople to see what they really do. And the salespeople need to spend some time with the marketing department to find out what they're doing to support them. And if you don't have that, you're always going to have this conflict. And I think a lot of it goes back to this misunderstanding or not understanding that there really is this buyer journey. The buyer, as Ken mentioned earlier, they can choose to skip steps, but they're in control. The buyer is in control of the process more than ever. And that's only going to increase it. Ken mentioned about a researching a car and going into a dealership. You don't even have to go into a dealership anymore. I mean, I guess if you want to test drive the car, but
they'll bring it to you now.
What's that?
They'll bring it to you now.
Yeah, they'll bring it to you, or you can buy a car online. You don't have to go into a dealership. I mean, now 10 years ago, that was unheard of. If you would have said 10 years ago, a few years, you're not going to have to go in a dealership to buy a car, people would laugh their ass off and told you you're nuts. And here we are.
Yeah. Well, and that's another great point. I mean, you got to think about blue ocean opportunities, right? I mean, because if you're trying to compete in the same ocean as everybody else, that ocean may be really busy and crowded. But if you can create your own area and truly differentiate yourself in the way you deliver your product or your service, then that can be a game changer. And, that requires communication across the entire organization. I would like to just add to what Paul said. Again, I think it's really, really easy for a business to make this mistake where they've got something that they can sell and that they historically have always been able to sell very easily. For whatever reason, it may not be the right thing to sell. It may not be the product that's profitable or scalable for them. It may not be the product that's teased them up, or the solution that tees them up for upsell or cross-sell opportunities. So you've got to look at, and in the time we live in, and right now, we've got inflation that's happening. There are fears of recession that are coming on. We may already have started to kind of creep into that. This is the time when a business needs to really step back and look at the profitability of every product or service that they offer. That has to be done strategically. So you have to get your product and your operations teams involved. And then once you have a profitable product or service that you can offer, Then you need to get your marketing and defining the messaging and creating the collateral and the material and helping guide that journey, and bringing in your sales team so that they all understand that this is what the business needs to be doing. And now is the perfect time to do that for every single business, because I think there's a likelihood that things are going to get a little bit tougher before they're going to get better for many businesses. And now is the time to get ahead of that.
Great points. Jen, any final comments from you?
Final comments. Well, Ken and Paul alluded to this, or didn't allude to it. They said it right out, and I think it's so important. If sales knows a little bit more about what marketing's doing, and marketing knows a little bit more what sales is doing, I think there would be, there's support there built in, right? Marketing brings people to the door, sales opens the door, and welcomes them in, and it's up to them to take it from there. However, even today, it's very easy to just take a quick introductory online course about sales or about marketing, and that'll give you a really good introduction as to what your counterpart down the hall is really dealing with every day.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and I would just add, when sales and marketing are supporting each other well, you actually help each other win, and you help the organization win. So I think this is a good place to wrap up. Thank you, Ken, Paul, and Jen, for sharing your thoughts on this important topic. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I hope you found this topic valuable. If so, please share the link to it with other businesses who would benefit from it. And until next week, keep calm and market on.